Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's program, Reclaim Your Calendar, Productivity and Time Management Tactics for Lawyers, Part 1, sponsored by the Women in Law section, the Committee on Law Practice Management, and the Committee on Continuing Legal Education of the New York State Bar Association. We would like to make a reminder that renewal season is now still underway for 2023. To renew your NYSBA and your section dues, please visit the link shown on the current slide. And if you have already renewed, we thank you for your continued membership and support. Today's program will run from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And during the course of today's program, if you would like to pose a question to today's speaker, please feel free to use the Q&A tab in the Zoom portal, not the chat function. And at this time, it is my pleasure to turn it over to the chair of the annual meeting and programming committee of the Women in Law section, Laura Sulam, for some opening remarks. Laura?
Thanks so much, Ernesto. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Sulam. I chair the Women in Law section's programming committee, and I'm also a senior director at Practical Law, which is a Thomson Reuters company. Thank you so much for joining the Women in Law section's program today on Reclaim Your Calendar, Productivity and Time Management Tactics for Lawyers. Before we get started, I would like to say just a few words about the Women in Law section. Our section has over 800 members and is dedicated to addressing really critical issues that impact women attorneys and women in general. We are always looking to increase our membership and to welcome women and men attorneys to our section. Please reach out to us if you would like to join. As a member, you can participate as much or as little as you like. And if you are interested in further developing leadership and speaking skills, you can join one of our committees, such as the annual meeting and programming committee, which helps organize both CLE and non-CLE events like this one, as well as our annual meeting each January and the Women on the Move program each fall. We have a Champions Men Advancing Women committee, which engages men as partners to advance women in the profession and our association and society in general. We have a General Counsel's Committee, which develops strategies and tactics to help advance women lawyers within companies and also as outside counsel. And we have a Legislative Committee, which drafts memos in support of or in opposition to proposed New York State legislation that affects women. These are just 4 of our 17 different committees, and we welcome your ideas and help for events and our other activities. We also have a newsletter called Wills Connect that's coming out soon, our latest issue. We're always looking for contributed articles, so please reach out if you would like to write for one of our upcoming issues. You can stay up to date with our section events by following our page on the NYSBA website. I also want to take just a minute to highlight some of the upcoming events we have planned and to welcome you to join any or all of them. On March 21st, we're hosting the Rise of Legal Technology in 2023, Opportunities and Challenges, and that's together with NYSBA's international section. On March 23rd, you can join us for our next virtual book club meeting on the change agents, Whisper in the Wind, and that meeting will feature the author of the book, Sarah Lewis. On March 29th, we have part 2 of this fabulous program, so make sure to put that in your calendar. On April 4th, you can join us for a program on what's next, alternative careers for lawyers. And finally, on April 27th, we have another book club meeting for the memoir, Getting to Ellen, a memoir about love, honesty, and gender change. And the author, Ellen Krug, is attending the meeting to talk about the book and answer questions. So with that, we can get started on our fantastic program that we have today, led by Alyssa Malin. Alyssa is an attorney and professional development and wellness coach to lawyers. Inspired by her own experience as an attorney whose life was transformed by coaching, Alyssa became a certified coach, left her job as general counsel to a New York City real estate investment firm, and founded the STET Collective to help other attorneys achieve the same kind of transformation. You can find Alyssa's full bio in the program materials. Alyssa, I will now turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am just going to share my screen now to bring up our presentation for the day. All right. There we go. You should be able to see the starting slide. So I am Alyssa Malin. As Laura said, I am a coach to attorneys. I am the founder of the STEC Collective, which is a online coaching and community for lawyers. We offer coaching to women in law, but really anyone who is seeking out coaching, especially attorneys. And prior to founding the STEC Collective, I was a practicing attorney for over 15 years. I started my career at a law firm, practicing in real estate law, a mid-sized boutique law firm. From there, I went in-house and I practiced for almost 10 years in an in-house capacity at a real estate investment firm, with my most recent position being general counsel to that firm. And then from there, I founded the STEC Collective. And the reason I became a coach and founded the STEC Collective is really has a lot to do with time management. I struggled with time management throughout my career. When I first started law, I thought, maybe this is just a learning curve. Maybe I'm just learning how to manage my time and it'll come easier with time. But that never happened. I struggled and well into my career. And eventually, when I was thinking about starting a family, I realized I really needed to figure this out. If I want to have time to spend with my family and still, perform all of the work I had on my plate in the office, I really needed to figure out how to be a better manager of my time. And so I started working with a coach. And beyond time management, the things I learned working with this coach were really transformative. I learned how to better manage my time, but I also learned all kinds of other ways to find balance in my life and to have a more sustainable life, both inside and outside the office. And so I just thought to myself, as I learned all these things, I wish I would have learned this 15 years ago. I wish I could have come into the practice of law with this knowledge. And so I started getting trained as a coach. And from there, I got certified. I founded the STEC Collective. I left my position as general counsel, and I'm now a full-time coach to female lawyers. So with that, I first want to just say a big thank you to the New York State Bar Association for having me. I want to thank the Women in Law section, who are my collaborators on this programming. As many of you know, today or this month is Women's History Month. And so, it was important for us to do this programming because time management especially is a relevant issue for women in law. And I'll get into that a little bit further. I also want to thank the Committee on Continuing Legal Education, as well as the Committee on Law Practice Management, who are also co-sponsors on this program. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us. As you know, struggling with time management, it's often hard to find time to do anything, especially to learn about time management. So thank you for being here. And I think that this time, stepping away from whatever you have going on today will be worth it. So I told you about me, my journey from real estate attorney to general counsel to coach to lawyers. And I've told you about the STEC Collective. I do suggest that attendees here go and subscribe to my website. The website address is at the bottom of the screen. I am going to offer 3 free coaching sessions to attendees who subscribe on my website. I'll do that at the end of March once we've had the second half of this session. But please do go and subscribe on my website, thesteccollective.com. So our agenda for today. So today we will, let's see here. Today we will be focusing on really mostly on procrastination. And the reason for this is that procrastination is one of the most pervasive problems I've observed among my clients, among my colleagues when I was still practicing, and really among humans in general. Procrastination is a big problem, and it's particularly a problem for lawyers. So we'll start out talking about lawyers and time management, why lawyers tend to struggle with time management. We'll move on to perfectionism and productivity and how procrastination relates to all of this. And then finally, we'll come up with some solutions for how to reduce or even maybe eliminate your procrastination tendencies. So to understand what I'm going to be teaching today, I need to share with you my coaching philosophy, because it is different than what you may have experienced or what you may assume coaching is about. So people seek coaching because they want to change something in their lives. Perhaps they want to change something that they're doing. So for example, overeating, or maybe spending too much time on social media, or in the professional setting, maybe they want to stop overworking or create something new in their life, like better health or more time with family. So most coaches in the industry are trained to focus on helping their clients with changing their actions to get their new desired results. They do this through, you've probably seen accountability coaching, habit tracking. It's very action focused. Change your actions and you'll have different results. But the problem with this is that action-based coaching often doesn't work for the same reason most New Year's resolutions don't work. For example, if your New Year's resolution is to go to the gym 3 times a week, but you hate exercising and you feel a sense of dread every time you think about it, the odds are you are not going to follow through with your plan, because your thoughts and your feelings about the gym are not aligned with the act of going to the gym. So rather than being action focused, my approach to coaching is based on the teachings of cognitive psychology and neuroscience. And that's to say that my approach is based on the premise that long-term change cannot occur in our lives without some adjustment in our beliefs about ourselves and about the world around us. There's no question that changing our actions is going to create a new result. If you start doing something different, you're going to get different results. But what drives our actions? Our belief system. We act based on what we think and believe, and based on the emotion inspired by our thoughts and beliefs. So to get the lasting result in your life that you're looking for, you may have to make adjustments to the way you are thinking and therefore feeling. So returning to our example of the gym, if the thought is, I hate exercising, which produces a feeling of dread, we need to adjust that thought to a more helpful thought that will inspire a more helpful feeling. For example, a replacement thought might be, I always feel better after I go to the gym. I always feel better after I exercise. And that thought, though it's not, we're not striving for the power of positive thinking. We're not aiming to come up with the opposite thought of the original unhelpful thought. We're looking for a thought that we can believe. So if I always feel better after I exercise is the thought that you can believe, then that thought will likely create a feeling that is more likely to inspire going to the gym. So using this coaching framework, I work with my lawyer clients to reduce stress and burnout, improve time management, balance their workload, and just really create a more sustainable and fulfilling life inside and outside the office. All right. And the last comment I want to make on my coaching philosophy, which is much of the reason I'm here today presenting to you, is that I coach through a feminine and feminist lens. So when I'm working with my female clients, everything that I'm teaching is done with feminist theory and thought and the struggles that are specific to women in the workplace. And so, as I said before, this is why, because of the time management that women in particular the struggles that women in particular see in the workplace, especially women in law, we thought that this would be a great program to put on together with the Women in Law section. So, as I said, I will coach anyone, and anyone who wants to work with me. And for the most part, the issues that I coach on are common to all people. But as I will discuss in more detail, people who become lawyers tend to share some traits which make them more prone to certain struggles, including time management, which we are discussing today. So that's why I focus on lawyers. But I focus on female lawyers because due to social conditioning and the realities of professional women's lives, some of the struggles lawyers experience are experienced by women at a heightened level. Either more frequently or more intensely or both. So in other words, the way women are socialized and the way we as a society are socially conditioned to treat women affects how women show up and conduct themselves in the workplace and how they are treated in the workplace. With that in mind, I coach through a feminist lens, working with my female clients to identify the feelings and thoughts that they're having that are influencing the way they are showing up in their lives, and identifying those thoughts that may be a product of the social conditioning I just mentioned. Okay, so let's start talking about our topic, time management. You may have signed up for this webinar thinking I was going to teach you the perfect organizational system and the system that is the key to a stress-free life as a lawyer. And I wish that I had that organizational system myself, but the truth is there is no perfect organizational system. Now I'm going to ask the audience, and I believe you can raise your hand. So click the little raise your hand button if this is relevant to you. By show of hands, and it's anonymous, how many of you have had an organizational system that wasn't working for you? So you revamped it or adopted the system of a colleague only to find that the new one doesn't work either. You put things you want to accomplish on your calendar, but then you ignore them. Or you have a to-do list for the day, but at the end of the day, you've barely crossed anything off the list, or maybe nothing off the list. And it's often the most important things that you don't get to. So show of hands, how common is this among our audience? All right, I'm seeing a bunch of hands go up. A lot of hands go up. Okay. All right, so it's common. And it was common for me as well. I would, when I was practicing and even when I was in-house, I had a running list of to-do. Sometimes it was multiple pages. And, I would try to prioritize, star the items that, were highest priority. And then really the day would get away from me and I would be working at a crazed pace all day. No time to come up for air. And at the end of the day, I hadn't even tackled the one thing that I wanted to get done that day. So I can relate to those that are raising their hand. And there's a reason that this happens. No organizational system, no matter how good it seems, will work for you without the proper mindset to actually implement and follow through with that system. And when I say mindset, I'm referring to the thoughts and feelings I was talking about earlier. The way of thinking that is driving our actions and creating our results. Okay, so why do lawyers struggle so much with time management? I love this little cartoon. Sorry, it's a little blurry, but it says the key to time management is strict and disciplined adherence to a rigid schedule while remaining flexible enough to let anything happen at any time. And I think as lawyers, we can all relate to this. Our workload is heavy and it's also very unpredictable. And, we as lawyers tend to be very strict and disciplined people. That's how we became lawyers. We like rules. We like being able to predict what will happen. And so of course, I'm speaking in broad strokes here. Not all lawyers have a hard time with time management, but survey after survey, in survey after survey, lawyers consistently rank among the most stressed out of all professions. And the explanation most commonly given for this state of distress is time. There's not enough of it. Not enough time for the amount of work we are given, not enough time to spend with family and friends, not enough time to pursue interests outside the office. And even the most common disciplinary complaint lodged against attorneys by their clients which is neglect, relates to poor time management. Failure to return calls, missed deadlines, failure to communicate, etc., are all forms of neglect, and they are all products of poor time management. So, what distinguishes lawyers from other professions with regard to time? Of course, there are the conventional reasons, which I just mentioned. The nature of the profession. Being a lawyer is incredibly challenging. The substance of the work on its own is demanding, but add to that a heavy and unpredictable workload where the numerous needs of numerous clients must be juggled and prioritized above all else. And you have a situation where time management becomes very complicated. When I was looking up the statistics on the most stressed out positions, another one that would commonly came up was customer service, which I thought, okay, well, being a lawyer is also customer service. So we're really out of luck in that regard between being lawyers and being in customer service. I also want to mention here that, I think the majority of people in attendance today, and I think we have over 100 registrants. So great turnout for this event. And it seems like most of the people that registered came from the law firm practice setting. But we do have some people in government and public interest and in-house. And so I am, for the most part, speaking in the context of the practice of law with a law firm, but any of these situations can be transplanted into the in-house and government or public interest roles. In government and public interest, you commonly have a situation of understaffing, which creates a huge workload. And then also in the in-house setting, while you don't have your company is your client, but within the company, you have a number of different clients in all of the different departments of the company that you're serving, and you're juggling all of their interests. So those are the conventional reasons. Then there are the kind of unconventional underlying reasons, which can really be boiled down to one word, and that's perfectionism. I, for a long time, didn't think that I was a perfectionist because I looked around and was like, well, my life's not perfect, so I can't be a perfectionist. And at that time, I didn't really understand the meaning of perfectionism, but it's become a term that's become much more commonplace today. And I've realized that actually I am a walking perfectionist. So perfectionism is the belief that perfection is attainable and that you should always be in a state of self-improvement because you or your work are not acceptable in their current state. Now, of course, as a coach, I'm all for self-improvement. But if you're trying to improve yourself because you believe that you are not good enough or your work is not good enough as it is, that's a problem. And the problem with trying to attain a perfection is that perfection doesn't exist. It's subjective. There is no perfect brief. There's no perfect contract. There's no perfect memo. There's no perfect oral argument. And even if there was some objective definition of perfection, when your brain's base belief is that everything you do could be better, all it will do is look for evidence to support this. Your brain is not a reliable narrator of your performance. It's actually an unreliable witness that kind of changes its testimony all the time to suit its story. I wish we could delve a little bit deeper into perfectionism today because it really is at the root of a lot of the mindset and work-life struggles that that attorneys have. But we don't really have time to get into the depths of it. It's something that I get into very deeply with my clients. So if you are interested in learning more about your perfectionist tendencies, feel free to reach out to me. But we do need to move on to our main topic today, which is procrastination. I will leave you with one thing regarding perfectionism, and that's that the only way to get rid of the self-criticism and perfectionism that you create in your mind is to not be perfect. Is not to be perfect. Excuse me. The only way to get rid of that critical mind is not to be perfect, but to accept imperfection. And one of the easiest ways to start accepting imperfection is to think about when you're beating yourself up about something, a mistake you made, or telling yourself you need to be better, think about the people in your life, or even the animals in your life, your dog, your cat, that you still love, even though they are not perfect. Think about a colleague who has made mistakes that you still admire and respect. And then think about the times that you've made mistakes and people still loved you, or you weren't fired, or you even had a stellar year-end review, notwithstanding those mistakes. Rather than chasing each new milestone for what is the new perfect, it's better to work on training your brain to believe that you can feel satisfied with yourself, imperfections and all. Okay, so why all this talk about perfectionism? Well, perfectionism leads to two of the biggest productivity killers, procrastination and overwhelm. Perfectionism causes procrastination because if you believe your work isn't good enough or could always be better, you are always going to want to avoid that work as long as possible. I'll repeat that. If you believe that your work isn't good enough or could always be better, you are always going to avoid that work as long as possible. Perfectionism also leads to overwhelm because if you're constantly thinking you could be doing better, doing everything better, you become overwhelmed with all of it. You don't know where to start, and you become exhausted, and you end up just doing nothing. So procrastination is our topic today, and we're going to address overwhelm as well as some other topics for part 2 of this webinar on Wednesday, March 29th. But I do want to mention here that along with procrastination and overwhelm, people-pleasing and imposter syndrome are also products of perfectionism, and they each contribute to procrastination and overwhelm and time management struggles in their own way. I'll touch on that as we continue this discussion, but I want to flag here that these traits are particularly common among women because women are socialized to be caretakers. And because we're socialized to be caretakers, we often put the needs of others before us, and we derive our value from others based on others' opinions of us. So I just want to flag that because, as I mentioned before, many of the traits that we're discussing here that affect time management and the experiences that we have as lawyers are heightened for female attorneys and are experienced at a greater frequency because of social conditioning. I also want to say here that none of these traits, people pleasing, perfectionism, what else? Imposter syndrome. None of them are inherently bad. They were all developed over time as humans as a way to protect ourselves. They're almost an instinctive behavior because, historically humans are tribal peoples, and our survival in, primitive times was based on our acceptance by the tribe. So it was natural to people please and to want others to like you and to want to do everything right. And so I don't want to when you're finding that you're having these tendencies of perfectionism and people pleasing and imposter syndrome, don't be too hard on yourself. These are natural instincts and most humans have them. It's just a matter of managing them when necessary to get the results you want. Okay, so procrastination in lawyers. So procrastination and its association with lawyers, a lot of it has to do with how we as lawyers are trained. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that. I'm going to speak about the biology and the science of procrastination. I'm then going to talk about the myth of working better under pressure. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the solutions for stopping procrastination. Okay. All right. So our relationship with procrastination starts well before, and perfectionism for that matter, starts well before law school. There's a lot of psychological reasons for this. I won't get into them. I'm not a psychologist. I'm sure you can read about them online, but perfectionism and the tendency to procrastinate often show up early in our life. And for me, procrastination started surfacing very early, as early as elementary school. And it continued through high school and into college. I was, the person that stayed up all night writing the term paper, stayed up all night, finally reading the textbook before the exam. And in law school, that also continued. So it starts early. And then during law school, we receive a lot of training that is helpful to us as we become lawyers, but is also unhelpful to us in many ways, in that it may be helpful or it may promote procrastination. So one example is that, hypotheticals and worst case scenarios. In law school, everything you read involves worst case scenarios and hypotheticals. You're always reading about when things went wrong and how and who's right and who's wrong and how to fix it. So this is obviously very helpful for practicing law, but we're never really taught how to rein it in. And so we start having these thoughts about worst case scenarios in every part of our life. And it kind of puts a pessimistic lens on our viewpoint. The second reason is we're taught in law school that the stakes of our work are very high. And in many cases they are, but we're also taught that really any mistake could be a disaster. The miswording of a contract and the failure to include a critical argument in a brief. And sometimes these mistakes can lead to disbarment and malpractice and other kinds of violations. But the problem is that the high stakes, the perception of everything being high stakes, puts a lot of pressure on everything we're doing, and it really causes fear of making a mistake for people who are at risk or who are already risk adverse. So the next example of how procrastination is kind of indoctrinated into us, or perfectionism is indoctrinated into us during law school, is the Socratic method, which is, one of our old favorites. And the Socratic method, as you know, is, the method by which many professors direct their classes, where, you show up for class, you're expected to have done the reading, and you don't know if you're going to get called in. And so you're sitting there in fear of not knowing the answers. And so you feel that this pressure to always have all the answers, to always be right. And that, then continues well into your law career. And then competitiveness. this is a little less relevant for, sorry, I'm just having a little technical difficulty here. This is less relevant. Competitiveness is less relevant for what we're talking about today, procrastination, but the competitiveness that we experience in law school is it creates a feeling of scarcity, and it also creates a environment of comparison. And this can often lead to imposter syndrome, and imposter syndrome can often lead to procrastination in the sense that we feel that we are not deserving of whatever role we're in, or we're not smart enough, or we're not as smart as the next person. And so we are not going to be able to do the work at the level that we want to, or at the level of our neighbors. So so that the competitiveness can also contribute to perfectionism and procrastination. And then lastly, testing, which I think this is a big one, and I'm not sure if law schools still conduct testing this way. But when I was in law school, we really had one test at the end of the semester, and that was it. Pretty much every course was just one test at the end of the semester. And this is really bad for procrastination, because it really allows you to, put off your reading for the whole semester, to the extent that the professor's not going to call on you. You can put off your reading, put off doing any work, put off your outlining for the whole semester. And then when the testing time comes, then you do it all at the last minute. And because we are smart, and because we were able to, still do well, notwithstanding these behaviors, we continue to engage in these behaviors. And so, like I said, on top of all of this training that we receive in law school, we are never taught any time management skills, or taught how to counteract all of this training with regard to time management. Okay, and so all of this carries over into post-law school and into our careers. Like I said, catastrophizing, always thinking that the worst case scenario is going to happen, contributes to procrastination, in that, if we believe that we're going to get the negative feedback, or we believe that we're going to lose the case, or we believe that we're not good at whatever the work may be, we're always going to assume the worst outcome. And so that's going to create a feeling of anxiety in us that is going to make us want to avoid the work. Similarly, trouble spotting is also a trait that carries over into our practices. We're always looking for what could be missing. And so in terms of procrastination, we are trying to figure out what kind of bad outcome, again, will come of this work, or, thinking that there might be some missing critical piece of our work, and therefore we procrastinate over the anxiety of that. Next, over analysis is a big one. We're taught to be analytical and to have all the answers, and so we're concerned with having all the answers in our work, and creating perfect work, and making sure that we don't miss a single angle as we submit our work product. And so that kind of pressure makes everything take a long time. And when you think something's going to take a long time, you put it off. You want to wait until the perfect time where you have enough time to work on it, and that time never really comes. The adversarial nature of the practice of law causes us to kind of expect criticism at every turn, and for others to pick our work apart. And of course, that can invoke anxiety and a fear of actually doing the work, because once the work's complete, you're expecting an onslaught of critical feedback. So this way of thinking and being in your professional life leads naturally to anxious feeling around your work, especially if it is work that you believe is hard, or that you think you're not good at. So while a lot of this is training, a lot of this training is what makes us a good lawyer, It's also very anxiety inducing. And when we feel anxiety, we try to get away from it by avoidance and by procrastination. Okay. So now I am going to get into a little science, a little brain science, which as a lawyer, science is not my forte, but this understanding is really important to understanding procrastination. So there are two parts of the brain that I want to focus on with respect to procrastination. The first part is the prefrontal cortex, and that is the part of the brain that is the more newly developed part of the brain that's responsible for executive function, long-term thinking, creative strategic ideas, and it's the part of your brain that creates a sense of discipline in you. And then there is the amygdala, and the amygdala I like to call the primitive brain. It's the oldest part of your brain evolutionarily. And it's the part that we share with other animals. It's the part of our brain that's responsible for the fight or fright response when danger is sensed. So the amygdala, or the primitive brain, evolved to protect us from danger. And when it senses a threat, it starts to freak out, and it produces a stress response in our bodies, which means that our brain is telling our body to release cortisol and adrenaline into the system to help us outrun the threat. So, it used to be that we were running away from lions and bears who wanted to eat us. And so when we saw a lion and we sensed a threat, the body would produce the cortisol and adrenaline to make us stronger, faster, feel less pain. These hormones cause our muscles to tense, our blood flow increases, heartbeat goes up, you become less sensitive to physical pain, and all of this gives you more endurance to get away from that lion or bear. So what's the problem here? The problem is that the primitive brain has not caught up to modern times. We no longer have to worry about getting eaten by a lion or a bear. But the primitive brain doesn't know this because it evolved billions of years ago. So the primitive brain today is bored. It doesn't have any lions and bears to look out for, so it's looking for other things to be afraid of. And even though there are no longer things out there trying to kill and eat us, that part of our brain just doesn't shut down. Instead, it just responds to smaller threats all the time, even though the smaller threats are not really presenting the same kind of danger as a lion or a bear. So the next logical question is, why does my brain see a brief or a contract or whatever the work may be as a threat? And the reason is because the same way as if you saw a lion or a bear and had a thought that the lion is dangerous, and obviously that thought is subconscious. You see the lion and you immediately think danger, and you have this stress response, and you run away. You the same way that you have that thought and response, usually a subconscious response, you have the same kind of thought and response about the brief. The brief sends up a similar danger signal and causes a stress response, and your instinct is to get away from it by avoidance and procrastination. So procrastination is caused by your thoughts and the fear and anxiety response you experience in your body by thinking a thought that somehow signals that the work is a danger or a threat to you. For example, let's talk about some of the thoughts that may create a danger signal for us in our professional lives. So one thought may be, I hate reviewing contracts. I was one of those people, and ironically, I ended up in a position where the majority of my job was reviewing contracts and negotiating contracts. But it was something that I never thought I was very good at. So that would be something that would cross my mind. I hate contracts, or I'm not good at reviewing contracts. Or another common one is, I don't want to receive negative feedback. And so upon completing the work that you have to do, you know that this negative feedback is coming. Perhaps you have a partner that is particularly critical, or you have a fear that you are going to lose the case, and so you don't want to complete the work and turn it in because you don't want to lose the case, or you don't want to lose the particular argument. You also may have thoughts about your ability to do the work and do it well, and what will happen if you don't do it well. So these thoughts are, I don't know how, or I'm not good at this. We're trained as lawyers to always have all the answers, and it is dangerous to not know the answers. This really backfires for us when we are trying to do or learn something new, because your brain tells you you should know how to do it. We think we should know all the answers, and so we think we should know how to do it. And if we don't know how to do it, we kind of shut down and avoid. So for example, if the work requires you to figure out some new, flesh out some new kind of legal argument, and your brain may tell you, I don't know, which triggers anxious feelings because you believe you are supposed to know. And so, you can go on for like this for a while, avoiding the anxiety, avoiding the stress of doing the work, and responding to that danger signal your brain is sending up. But the reason we always eventually do the work, well, for the most part, unless you miss a deadline, you almost always end up doing the work. And the reason we ultimately get the work done, this is kind of funny to me, the reason we ultimately get the work done is because as we get closer and closer to the deadline becomes the new bigger threat. So the deadline becomes the new lion that's going to eat you. So previously the threat was the work itself. Now the deadline is the threat. And the only way to get away from the anxious feeling caused by this new threat of the deadline is by actually doing the work. So the irony here is that your procrastination kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because your original fear was that the work wouldn't be good enough. And by procrastinating, you have now set yourself up for a situation where the work isn't as good as it could have been, and it may produce the result you feared: negative feedback, an unsatisfied client, or losing a case or an argument, or looking unprofessional, or not knowledgeable about the subject. Because of your procrastination, you've sacrificed a lot of the creativity and strategic thinking that you would have been able to do if you had been doing the work on a more timed out schedule. And the stress that's created at this stage when you're now doing the work under the stress of this deadline puts blinders on your intellectual abilities. It kind of shuts down some of the executive function of the prefrontal cortex. And so where you were previously focused on getting away from the threat, now you are, your brain is shutting down because of the threat of the deadline, at the detriment of your work product. So when you procrastinate, the work is never as high quality as it could have been. If you spend a whole week thinking about the work and writing and revising and sharing with your colleagues and getting their ideas, your work is always going to be a lot better than it is when you complete it within 24 hours at the last minute, which is, what I used to do. So when you procrastinate, you leave little time for review. You've limited the time spent thinking, developing, working, and you are doing all of this under undesirable circumstances. Extreme stress, you're often tired because you've stayed up. You are dealing with the physical symptoms of the stress, which can often lead to confusion in the brain and thereby affect your work. And the procrastination that you previously did actually didn't do anything to reduce your stress at all, because now, instead of worrying about the work you are stressed out about, instead of worrying about the work, you are now stressed out about the fact that you are putting it off. So when you may choose to procrastinate to avoid the stress and anxiety, but in reality, once you start procrastinating, now you're stressed out about the fact that you're procrastinating. So our fears that make us procrastinate in the first place cause our fears to become true. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, so what are we going to do about all of this? Like I said, mindset is really the key here. You're not going to be able to follow through with anything on your calendar if you don't have the mindset to attack that calendar. And so with procrastination, it's all about mindset. Once you understand the thoughts that cause procrastination, then you can change those thoughts, and you do not need the deadline to force you to produce the work at the very last minute. So how do we change? If the cause of the problem is your thoughts, then the solution will also be your thoughts. Actually, I want to pause here for 1 second. We put together a poll here, and it may be a little bit after the fact because I passed over my note wanting to address the poll, but let's bring up the poll. I wanted to poll the audience on procrastination. So if you could all just participate in this poll with the 3 questions. Do you procrastinate? Do you think procrastination is necessary or helpful? And do you think you work better under a deadline or pressure? It's a little after the fact, but I'll be interested to see what the response is. Okay, so while you're doing that, I'm gonna continue here. So once you understand the thoughts that cause procrastination, then you can change those thoughts, and you do not need the deadline to force you to produce the work at the very last minute. So how are we doing this? If the cause of the problem is your thoughts, then the solution is also your thoughts. So step 1 is to identify the thinking that caused the procrastination. For example, if the thought may be, I don't know how, or this is hard, or I'm afraid of bad feedback. This is a process of inquiry for you that you have to do with yourself. You cannot just accept this is hard as at face value. You have to ask more inquisitive questions. So one good question to ask is, why am I avoiding this work? Another is, what am I afraid will happen once this work is complete? Another is, what feeling or fear am I trying to avoid by procrastinating? I find it helpful to write this out and maybe even do a little bit of free journaling on these questions, because it can take a little while to bring. These are not conscious thoughts most of the time, and we're not practiced in observing our thoughts. So it may take a little time to get to the root of what the real thought is that's causing this anxious feeling and leading you to procrastinate. So for example, if the thought is, this is hard, why is it hard? And the answer may be, it's hard because I don't know this topic, the subject area. And so why is that a problem? Well, if I don't know, then I might not do a good job on the memo. I may not have all the answers, and then my partner may be dissatisfied with me, or the client may give bad feedback, or the memo won't be effective. So you kind of can dig in more to what is actually causing the anxiety, and really it's about your questions about your own ability, or your fear of what will happen once the work's complete, bad feedback. So you will know you have found the right thought when you think it and you feel that anxious, agitated feeling. Sometimes it can be a little bit heavier of a feeling, like dread, or even as far as depressed. But you'll know you'll have the right feeling when you kind of feel that agitated feeling in your body. Step 2 of getting past procrastination is to come up with a new thought to replace that problematic thought and to think that thought on purpose. So a good way to start is just brainstorm some potential thoughts that could be good replacement thoughts for the original thought. So if the original thought was, I don't know, a new thought could be, I have always managed to figure things out in the past when I didn't know. It needs to be a thought that you can believe. It doesn't have to be the opposite. So like if the thought is, I don't know, it doesn't need to be, I know how to do this, or I have all the answers, because that's not something you can believe. And that's, that's just, what people will call it the manifestation or the power of positive thinking. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to find a thought that makes you incrementally feel a little bit better. And it has to, like I said, it has to be something that you believe. And you'll know that the new thought is helpful when you think it and the thought, and you notice that you feel better than you felt thinking the original thought. Doesn't have to be 100% turnaround. Just try to feel incrementally better, a little bit better, reduce that stress response a little bit, reduce that cortisol, reduce that adrenaline, reduce the fast breathing, and that will help your brain become more clear-headed and less fearful. So here are some more example thoughts. If the fearful thought is about the outcome, you can instead think about past positive outcomes you've had, or you can think, if I actually start the work now, I will produce a better product and I'll have less of a chance of negative feedback. Or if the problematic thought is about your own abilities, you can think about your many past accomplishments of things that were challenging. And if your negative thought is about the work itself, like I hate contracts, you can kind of get curious with yourself and think about whether, do you really have to think that? Could you think instead, contracts are not my favorite part of this job, but they are never that bad once I get started? Or if the idea is that something is hard or it's going to take a long time, you can think, it never takes as long as I think it will. Or it's never as hard to find the answers as I think it will be. So this is not something that happens overnight. This kind of thought work that we're talking about, replacing the original subconscious thought with a thought that we think on purpose, takes time and practice. The more you practice, the less you will feel that stress response. And without the stress response, you will not need to avoid the work and that you once put off. So procrastination is ultimately solved by changing the thoughts you have about the work and about yourself. We cannot change the work's existence. I mean, maybe somehow we can, but the immediate concern is not the work's existence. There's not much we can do about it. And the immediate thing we can do is changing the problematic thoughts that you have about the work and about that you have about the work, and find a thought that will produce a much lower or even no stress response in your body. And with that stress response, without that stress response, you will not need to avoid the work anymore. Like I said, it takes a lot of practice. This is still something that I practice on a regular basis, even with this this presentation, which I do on a regular basis, but I have to often, update slides and update information. And, I often have the tendency to procrastinate. And so I have to think through, often the thought that I have for this type of presentation is, I kind of spoke to it earlier in the presentation, that, people are signing up for this presentation because they want the answer to time management. And I'm not giving them a clear-cut answer. I'm giving them skills that they have to develop to become better at time management. And maybe they're not going to be satisfied with that. And so the thought that I use to replace that thought that produces fear in me is that these concepts that I'm teaching you today are concepts that really resonated with me. and they really changed the way I approached my work life. And if they resonated with me, they're going to resonate with people in the audience. And that motivates me to get started on the work and feel less fearful about the outcome of the work. It takes practice, and your progress will be incremental. But the more you practice, the stronger that muscle will become, and the easier it will be to resist the urge to procrastinate. So that is where we are. That's our topic today. Like I said, we are going to cover some other topics. I see we've run out of time here, so I apologize for that. And I think just to be respectful of time, I'm going to reserve. Please keep track of your questions, and I will address them at the outset of the next session, because I do want to answer your questions, or please feel free to contact me directly, and I'm happy to speak with you directly. But I do want to just speak to what's coming for next week. The topics we're going to cover are overcoming overwhelm, methods to produce immediate calm, prioritizing your work, productivity and organizational tips, and the work-life balance myth. And, I think for a lot of you, you're going to get some of those practical skills coming out of the second part of the webinar. So I strongly encourage you to join us. There's a lot more to learn. Procrastination is a huge problem, but there are also other problems that we want to address, and practical skills that we can learn to make everyday life as a lawyer a lot easier. So thank you again to the Women in Law section. Apologies for running a couple minutes over here. And also we'll address that poll that we took in the next session as well. I do want to talk a little bit about that. So please join me on March 29th for the second part of this program. And I look forward to seeing you. And I hope you've had some good takeaways from today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for an engaging and interesting presentation. I definitely have takeaways from today, and I really enjoyed it. And many thanks to all of you for attending today's program. As Alyssa mentioned, please be sure to join us for part 2 of this program on Wednesday, March 29th at 12 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alyssa, again for that program, just echoing Laura's sentiment. This does conclude our program. Please make sure to return to your My Learning dashboard and complete the course evaluation. Thank you for choosing New York State Bar Association programs, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Alyssa.